Welcome back to another episode of the It Starts With You podcast. I'm so excited to have Dan Burnett on the podcast today, and we're going to be geeking out on leadership and learning cultures. Dan, thank you for joining me.
Julie, thank you for the invitation. I'm really glad to be here.
And hopefully you don't get offended by me. I always call myself a leadership geek because I just get obsessed with talking about leadership and how we can all become better. So I'm not calling you one. I will just own the title.
That's a badge I would wear with honor. I absolutely can geek out about leadership, Julie.
See that I know you're my people. Dan and I actually used to work together in,
We did.
talent development, and so excited that we've had an opportunity to stay connected. So I'm going to share a little bit more about Dan, and then we're going to dive in to talk about creating learning cultures and really just helping you in your leadership. Dan believes people are alive with possibilities. His passion is to cultivate potential in others, nurture and refine it, and stretch it towards excellence. Dan is a workplace learning professional with over 20 years of experience cultivating learning cultures that prioritize gaining and sharing knowledge, learning from experience, remaining curious, one of my favorite words, and seeking new opportunities. Dan has a bachelor's degree in education and a master's degree in management and leadership. He is also the author of the book, I Am CXO, Now What? A Job Description for Living a Life of Purpose and Meaning by Westbow Press. Dan and his wife, Denise, have 2 grown children and reside in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. Woohoo, go Wisconsin. I know we've got listeners from all over, but as a fellow Wisconsinite here.
Yeah,
Okay, Dan,
yeah, roots in southeastern Wisconsin for sure.
I know, right? So I would love for us to just get started in, what got, give us a little bit more of your background of what really led you in getting into this space. Because I know people always love to hear people's journeys.
Yeah, I like to say it was a little bit by accident, Julie. And what I mean by that is, so I have a degree in elementary education, and there was a time where I thought I'd be an elementary school teacher.
Me too. I
And
didn't know that.
there's just another way that you and I have a commonality, right? And about the time I was ready to graduate, I just realized, gosh, I don't think that's for me. That doesn't seem to be where my heart is. And so I graduated and then hit the job market and my first, what I call my first real job. I worked for an organization who at the time was administering the welfare to work program here in Wisconsin. And my role was kind of two purpose. Half of my time I spent working with or connecting with employers in the community and trying to find work opportunities for the parents who were on welfare and aspiring to get off of welfare. It was kind of a sales role, I would say, and that's not really my space. I wasn't very good at it. But the other part of my job is I was able to do workshops for the parents who were job seekers on things like resume writing, interviewing skills, how to attain and maintain employment, things like that. And it was really my first exposure, Julie, into what I'll call adult education, a way that I could use some of the skills and the instruction that I gotten in education, but in a different venue. And I just fell in love with it. And so a couple of years later, I found a full-time job as a trainer in a financial institution doing new employee training, training new bank tellers, things like that. And that just eventually, led down the career path that I was on to where I am today.
I did not realize. I didn't realize. So I don't have a degree. I have a degree in communication, but it started in education. I wanted to be a teacher, and then my first job out of college was as a career advisor, helping people with interviews and resumes. And it's so funny because it was very similar. Of ooh, I love this idea of helping people, and then into the space. So that's so cool because I think a lot of people who find themselves in this space just find that love of helping people to develop, to grow, to learn, and then all of a sudden we just kind of become obsessed with it. What do you love about this space?
Oh, I'll kind of start with more of a personal or an internal perspective. I love how it allows me to do, it's a very strategic type of a job, which I love. There's a lot of project management and things that require organization and planning and things like that. But there's also a really healthy mix of creative, of design. Even today, I don't get to do it as much as I used to. But every once in a while, just when I feel like I need a little boost in my energy or just my creative level to create an e-learning course, for example, or to even just volunteer to say, hey, somebody needs a job aid, I'll design that job aid, just to get those creative juices flowing and start from a blank slate and create something that others can use to help them be effective in their job. So I like kind of the both sides of this role. And then, more of I guess, an external facing part of the job that I love is, I found that learning in the workplace is something that a lot of people don't necessarily, plan for or make time for or see as the number one thing on their job description. And that challenge of helping them to see how learning can happen within the normal flow of their day. And as you mentioned in my introduction there, I am a firm believer that we are all just ripe with potential, and I love that challenge of helping people unlock that and to see that in themselves and to inspire them to want to be better, to do better, to even if they've ultimately failed, to try to do something new and different and better. And for me, it's all about inspiration, and I love inspiring people to want to be their best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you started to hit on something that I really want us to, I think, start by talking about is the challenges, because obviously both of us, having worked in this space, like some of the things that we hear is, I don't have time for development, or there's too much to do, or it's an extra thing we have to do. And we're trying to help change that conversation around, implementing it. So what are some of the other things that you hear, some of the challenges that, leaders and organizations have with actually integrating or implementing it within like the day-to-day?
Yeah, it's so interesting you bring that up, and I've gotten to the habit now when I'm talking with leaders about challenges. I just come right out and say, you don't have time is not an option. Like I know that that's something that is real and is top of mind for you. But let's talk about some of the other challenges you're facing, because there's never a good time for developing. You're always going to find something that you feel is more important or more pressing priority. So now, aside from that, I think I always say that people do the things that they're held accountable to. And what I found is that leaders in particular, the things that they're held accountable for are metrics driven, they're numbers, it's revenue, it's production, it's counts, it's dollars and cents. And I don't know that I can ever think of a time where I've heard about a leader sitting down with a person and saying, how many meaningful conversations did you have with your employee this week? Right? Oh, you only had 2. You were supposed to have 5, right? You didn't hit your metric, right? So that's an easy thing just to kind of let slide, because the reality is, if your production, I'll call it, is good, if you're the numbers, the revenue, the counts, the quantity, if those things are good, a lot of times the development part of it slides. And so the challenge is helping folks understand the what I'll call the multiplying effect of taking the time to invest in yourself, to invest in others, and how you can weave that into the normal flow of your day, and how that can ultimately have that impact that you want on, again, revenue, production, the numbers, the counts, but without ignoring the need that employees have in today's workforce to be developed. I'm sure you know as well as anyone, you stay up to date on current trends and things. Employees want that today. They want opportunities to learn and grow and to develop. And if we're not feeding that need, we're really neglecting what our workforce wants today.
Yeah, and I mean that's such a huge, having this conversation all the time, right? If we bring it back to the research, to the data, like coming from, as organizations, it makes sense. We're focused on metrics. We need to, and also then we also need to think about the metrics of if we don't develop our people, and what happens to retention, to engagement. How much does it cost to replace people? How much does it cost when you have people in roles who aren't fully upskilled or reskilled? It's like if we're going to talk about metrics, we need to look at metrics from a holistic perspective. So I love that you bring that up. So I'm curious, what have you been doing? What have you seen be successful of getting more of that buy-in for people, integrating it into their work and seeing some of the, I guess, the numbers side of it?
Sure. Well, what I try to do, Julie, is, my philosophy from a talent development perspective is, and I talk with my teams about this all the time, it's not about us. And I'll often tell managers when I'm consulting with managers, I want you to be the hero of the story, right? Like I could sit with your employees and I could have a meaningful conversation with them. I could provide them coaching. I could provide them with a stretch assignment to help them to upskill, whatever it might be. But I don't want to be the hero of their story. I want their manager to be the hero of that story. So it's really about engaging leaders in taking on that role of developing others. I have the good fortune of working with a CEO who often says, development isn't just a department, and it's something that is just kind of a way of work. It's a culture, and so back to this idea of like it's not about us. As much as we can, we try to incorporate folks from the business. That could be anything from a subject matter expert on a project. It could be someone who is helping to lead or facilitate a training call. It could be, someone who is delivering the in the moment coaching for an employee. And then I can help with some of the behind the scenes things. It could be moderating a conversation that where I'm almost like an interviewer and I'm drawing out of that subject matter experts the things that they're doing that's successful for them so that others in the organization can learn from it. And we'll oftentimes have different leaders from the field come in and be the quote unquote trainer or facilitator on a training call. And maybe it means that I or someone on my team has helped them do some coaching behind the scenes, help to create a set of learning outcomes, to help kind of create a plan or an outline for how we're going to get there and set them up with the tools and things that they need to be successful in that delivery of that development opportunity. But I think sometimes what happens is folks who are in our industry feel like the development or the learning needs to come from them. And oftentimes it's not even our own fault. It's because that's the expectation that's placed on us, right? But I am totally comfortable with kind of living in the shadows or in the corners, and I don't have any qualms with a development opportunity, a learning intervention, not even seeming as though it came from me or my team. And the things that we did are again, kind of in the background to support that. But, and then that just creates a habit, a bit of a muscle memory. And I'll give you just one quick example that comes to mind here, if I might, Julie. Mm-hmm. So, in my organization, we are, heavy virtual meeting users, kind of like you and I are doing today, right? And we didn't do much of that before COVID in 2020. We've adjusted like many organizations have. And early on, when we were doing training sessions in a remote environment like this, it was really difficult to get engagement out of our attendees, even in things like chat, putting a question into chat, or to unmute yourself and ask a question live was even a bigger challenge. So that was kind of the starting point, right? Like it's okay to interrupt, it's okay to come off camera, it's okay to speak up, it's okay to use chat, all of those types of things. Well, now fast forward, where we're at today, Julie, is there's often times where somebody will post a question into chat, and I won't even have to address it. There will be other employees from the organization that will provide the answer to that person. It's almost like crowdsourcing answers, if you will. But again, it's like they realize that they don't need that. I don't know if it's permission, if that's the right word, but I see it as each other taking accountability for everyone else's development, and I don't have to do a thing. Like they just kind of take care of each other in that way.
I love that. I'm jotting down so many things that I want to highlight of what you're talking about, because I know that these are conversations that I have with leaders with organizations all the time. And for those of you listening, if you've been a part of, we host executive forums just about every month, and where we bring together executive level leaders from a variety of organizations to talk about key topics. And this topic is actually one that Dan's, by the time this episode comes out, that forum is going to pass. But if you scroll onto the show notes, you can sign up to get notified when our next forum is, as well as we can share with you the notes, because I know Dan is going to share so much on our executive forum coming up here. When we're recording this, it's a couple weeks from now, and it's around this topic of how do we integrate learning into cultures. And so again, if you're an executive level leader, pause quick, scroll down to the show notes here to sign up for the next forum and to be able to get the notes for this. But this is such a big conversation that I'm having with people around how do we see this as not an extra thing, and how do we not just look to, if you call it learning and development in your company, or talent development, or training and development, the development team, right? So I love that you shared that if what you're doing in your organization of work is that it's not just on a department, it's not just on a person, that when you bring the business in, when you have accountability, right? Like that's such a great point. When people are held accountable to it, then they're more likely to show up and do it. And then it gets like a muscle memory, right? You get more comfortable
100%.
Doing it. That's where you create it part of the culture, where it's everybody's taking ownership of it and it's integrated, and it's not just like, hey, we need this department to come in and do it. So I just really wanted to make sure I highlight that, because I know that's still a struggle that a lot of organizations can have, is to integrate that. So I love those tips of just like having it be part of the accountability for leaders, having it be part of their development plan, having it come from the top. That's a huge thing, to have it come from the top, to say it's not just on this department.
That is such an important point, Julie, and I'm so grateful. I have the benefit of having that support from my senior leadership, and they're the first to admit that any conversation is an opportunity to be a development conversation, and any meeting has the opportunity to be a development meeting. And I think another, tip I would give to our listeners out there is maybe even just call that out, right? Like I've seen it where employees have said, my manager doesn't invest in my development. They don't believe in my development. And then as you dig deeper and ask a few more questions, you eventually find that, one manager did sit down and we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and they talked to me about some things that they observed in a project that I was working on, and so on and so on. And I'm like, I think that they were investing in your development, what you just described there. And so what I would say to leaders out there, sometimes maybe just call it out. Hey, Julie, I want to have a conversation with you about something I observed in the last project team check-in that we were having. And I want you to approach this as a development conversation, and just call it out for what it is. There's you and I and folks in our industry, we're used to tracking things like hours, spent in training per year, or dollars spent per employee on training and things like that. But there's all this other development that goes on that we can't even track, because a lot of times we don't even know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with that. I actually love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a great point too, for it's not just on yes, a lot of it falls on the leaders, because you are setting the expectations and the cultures, but also what I love you're emphasizing, because if someone's listening, like, well, I'm not a leader, right? We're telling you that you also take ownership of that. And if you don't feel like you're getting it, ask for what you need. And if you don't recognize it, then it is also on you to realize, like, oh, wow, there's other opportunities, or I need to ask for it, or I need to say more specifically what I need. And that you also then need to recognize that it's not always in the form of going to a training or sitting in a classroom or sitting in a virtual learning, that there's all of those micro moments, as I like to call them, like those micro moments that you're getting that. And the other thing that I want to talk about, Dan, because I know you and I have had this conversation before, because back to kind of the time thing, and what leaders and managers can say is, I don't have the time to do it. And I know I'm always trying to help leaders with like delegation and what do you need to be handing off so that you can be focusing on more strategic things. And so you and I have talked about this idea of this empowering our teams, and this idea of, when do we empower them and like let them run with it and come up with ideas versus being directive. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and what are some of the thoughts you had on that?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked about that, Julie. I've been thinking a lot about that. So, as I think about our current, workplace, some things that we know is that employees are looking for work-life flexibility. They are looking for ways to be efficient and how they do their work and get their work done. We know that there's a blurred line between a job and life, right? We're so much more accessible, so much more connected, that again, that line between job and life has blurred. So that tells me that employees appreciate again, efficiency and flexibility, and how to make the best use of their time when they are working. Now, on the leader side of it, I know that efficiency is also important. I know that adaptability is important. And I know that, again, it's best practice for leaders to empower and to engage their people. And I wonder, are we our efforts to empower our people, have we actually now started to see a bit where that's deteriorating some of the efficiency and some of the engagement? And so here's what I mean by that. And here's something I've been kind of trying out in my own practices as I lead my team. So if I am delegating a task, an assignment, a project, or something, and if I am super clear, and so I'm kind of looking at this, Julie, on two different planes. There's a clarity plane for me. So if I'm super clear on what it is that I'm expecting, like the vision is really lucid in my mind, and then if I also feel pretty strongly about that, like I'm not feeling super flexible about how that what that outcome is going to be, and I want the outcome to be pretty close to that vision that I have in mind. Like if I'm feeling that way about it, super clear. The other kind of plane or axis is conviction. If I'm clear and I'm convicted, then maybe I should just tell my team that, right? Like maybe I should just be super direct and just tell them what I want, and it's going to be super efficient, and they'll know what's expected of them, and they can go and execute on it, and then they can get back to doing all the other things that are important to them in their lives and work. Now, on the other side of that coin, however, there are going to be those times when I'm not super clear on what that end in mind is, right? I'm delegating something, I'm assigning something. I don't really have a crystal clear picture of what the end in mind is. And also, I may not be convicted on what that outcome, how we get there, or what it looks like. And I truly am being open to say, all right, team, here's what we're looking for. I know I'm maybe even being a little bit vague and ambiguous in defining this, and that's intentional, and that's okay. And I want you to go play, and I want you to go create, and then I'm going to be hands off. And because I've freed up time for them in the other scenarios, because we were super direct and clear and efficient, they now have that time to innovate and play and have fun. So again, I think it's you and I were talking recently about I think it's John Maxwell in his High Road leadership book. He talks about this leadership dance, and I love this idea, Julie, of there's times when as a leader we're out in front and we're leading the charge, and we're setting that example. And there's also times when we are leading from the back of the pack, and we kind of humble ourselves. We take more of that servant, I suppose, approach, and we let the teams. We encourage the teams to take that lead. And there's times when we're alongside our teams and walking alongside them. There's times that we're working below them, and so again, it's that dance of it's not a cookie cutter one size fits all approach, and it's being aware enough and mindful enough of the situation, and where again you need to be a bit more directive and out in front and say, here's what I'm looking for. And I think your employees, at least what I'm finding so far, is employees appreciate that. And sure, that might be a snapshot in time where they feel like, hey, I didn't have a whole lot of room to insert my voice here, and I didn't give a whole lot of input on it. I think any potential, what I'll call damage or risk to that is much less than the damage that's caused by a leader who says, and I had a situation where I did this recently, Julie, where I had a pretty clear end in mind of what I was looking for, and I was kind of rigid on what I thought that outcome should be, and I did not make that clear to my team. I was more of a, hey, what do you think, and what approach would you take, and why don't you start on the project and come back to me and let's see how you're doing. And it was more frustrating to my team than good, because at the end of the day, I should have just been super clear on what my expectations were. They could have delivered the outcome on that project more quickly and efficiently, and they would have had more time then where they could have devoted to those projects where they get to be more, again, creative and free and innovative.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think I love, there's so many things. First of all, I loved when, before we were recording this episode, where you were sharing this idea, because I really think for me, but also I know for a lot of people listening, that is such an aha moment where it's like, yes, there are times where as the leader, whether it's because it's just like, hey, this is like sometimes our leaders, those above us, know things that we don't know. Right. And so they might have, hey, I just know that this is kind of the way it needs to go based on the strategic vision or things like that. And I love the efficiency standpoint of like, let's not waste anybody's time if we kind of know at the end of the day, we just need, I'm just going to give a similar, like we just need a PowerPoint with blue font, with gold. Like, let's not have someone go and waste their time creating one if we know, hey, it needs to be branded like this. I'm just going to use that simple example. Yep. So I love that kind of checklist for leaders to go, hey, is this kind of something that I just need to tell them, hey, this is what we need to do? And then save the time and the creativity and the empowering and all of that for when there is more wiggle room. And so I love that you share that. And hopefully for those of you listening, that's helpful too, just think about. But the other thing I want to mention too, the words that came up for me when we were talking is just these three words, like clarity, communication, and expectations, because all of that kind of went hand in hand. If we are more clear on, hey, this is why it's this way, or hey, I don't know, so what are your ideas? And we communicate it and we set the expectations. I expect it this way, or I expect you to take it and run with it. Then there leaves less room for frustration because you've been open. So I appreciate you sharing, transparently too, be like, hey, we all, even though we teach this stuff, like we all get in that situation.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing and what you're saying, Julie, is they know the why behind it. And for our listeners out there, there could be scenarios where I'm trying to think of the types of examples. You could be under just a super tight time constraint. Or let's say that we're delivering something to an audience that is, what they're looking for is very, very prescriptive, and it could be maybe there's another governing board or a authority, so to speak, that this work is going to be delivered to. That again, they're pretty narrow on what they're looking for, and to share that why with your team. And in this case, here's why we're going to be pretty tight and exacting, and I'm going to be super clear on what we're looking for here. Again, I think the teams will understand that and appreciate the transparency there. And the flip side to all of that is we've freed up time then where they can really lean in with their creativity and their free will and their voice, to really create some spectacular work.
Yeah, it's so many benefits to come from that. And a couple more questions before I wrap up. One thing that came up for me, Dan, is, again, as you've been in this space and implementing this, what are some, or even just as you're, talking to other organizations, other leaders, what are some of the outcomes, like the positive side of when people intentionally create more learning cultures and integrate it more? Like, what are some of the things that happen that people can look to as like, hey, this is why we're doing this?
Yeah, thank you for that, Julie, that question. I would say one of the outcomes of that is that you get a coherent, a nice blend between the learning outcome, the learning solution, the project, whatever it may be, and the communication plan that needs to go around that. And I'm a big proponent in any training departments, L&D departments, talent development departments out there, taking a very active role in the communication plan around those learning solutions that they're being a part of and that they're collaborating on. And even if it's a situation where you're pulling in experts from the field and or maybe even external person, you're still a part of that communication process, and it just creates a very coherent and thoughtful and I think strategic kind of package for it all. Another upside to all this, Julie, I would just say you're going to have better managers, and that manager level in any organization is so critical, so important. And again, there's tons of research out there on the importance of a manager in the satisfaction that employees have in their work, the engagement that employees give in their work. And when you have managers who have the opportunity to learn and grow themselves and are given the opportunity to invest in their own development, and then can pay that forward. I don't want to underestimate in our conversation today, we've been talking a lot about, learning and learning cultures. A big component of that is how well employees in your organization do at paying that forward, right? So let's say that I've attained a new skill or attained some new knowledge, and that's a good thing, and that's a wonderful thing, and it can help me to do better in my job. But how well do I do at paying that forward on to others? And are there other folks in the organization that are benefiting from the skill or the knowledge that I've gained? So part of that, it's maybe a litmus test, I would say, in your learning culture is how often are employees sharing what they know and paying that forward with others. And, to kind of just circle that back to my point where I started, I would hope that managers would do that. And so learning cultures benefit organizations because you have better managers. You have managers who invest in their employees' development, and again, the upside to that is everything from retention to engagement to productivity to efficiency. We can go on and down the line.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, the visualization that came to my mind when you were talking about is that's that ripple effect, right? Where it's like, that's where we get the ripple effect of as one person develops, it's not just them developing, it's all of the people that they interact with. And those people are on project teams and cross collaborating, and they might grow to be a leader and keep growing. So, like, that is how you do it. And it's like when I want to shake people and tell them, like, it feels so big and like I was like hairy and scary to be like, we need to change our culture. That is like a huge ships to turn. But if you focus on the steps that get you to changing the culture, which is all the things that we're talking about here, that's how you start to really change it, because people are, I love how you said, like, they're really paying it forward and they're creating more of that. So such an important conversation. And Dan, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and experiences and all of the things, so many things for people to take away. I would say some of the highlights for those of you who are listening is like what I'm taking in my head as some of the big things is kind of that middle section first that we talked about was this whole idea of when do you be more directive versus when do you empower. So that's definitely something for those of you listening to really think about. Also, for those of you who are trying to implement more of a learning culture, is thinking about how are we approaching it every day and how are we holding our leaders accountable to making this part of their everyday work. And then also just really thinking about, like, why are we doing this? Coming back to the why and looking at the metrics and how by us creating this learning culture, it's going to impact the numbers that we care about, the productivity, the sales numbers or the retention numbers or the engagement numbers. So all of those things. So such a great conversation, Dan. Where can people find you and stay connected with you after they listen to this and they're like, I need more Dan in my life?
Well, Julie, thank you for the opportunity. It was just a joy talking with you as always. I'd love to connect with anyone who wants to reach out. You could find me, probably the easiest way is I have a website, dan-burnett.com. And from there, you can see where to find me on LinkedIn or contact me through the website. But yeah, dan-burnett.com.
Amazing. We'll make sure we drop that in the show notes for all of you as well. Thank you so much again. And remember to share this out, tag Dan when this episode is out, and let him know what really stood out for you. And hopefully this helps you to help implement more learning cultures.